What's up, outliers? Welcome to another Performance Bites for bite-sized insights into complex subjects in health and performance. Today, we're going to talk about sports psychology. Now, obviously, I'm not a sports psychologist, but as a certified strength and conditioning coach, this is something that is actually very important for us to know so that we can identify certain things with athletes and or just clients that we work with. A lot of the information I'm going to go over today is actually based upon what the NSCA teaches and expects us strength and conditioning specialists to actually know and understand. So, if we're working with a sports team or certain individuals, we can identify what those individuals need past just doing strength and conditioning programs. Now, of course, if it is a deeper problem, we're going to refer out and make sure that they go see the right people to help them in that sports psychology department. But we're just going to go over some information about what that looks like. What are these things that can be helpful? And also, what are some strategies to increase our sports performance through our mental game? Because that's really kind of what sports psychology is the psychological component of sports and performance. Now, we can enhance our physical performance through improving essentially these things of focus, motivation, stress, anxiety, arousal, and this type of stuff that we're going to go over and break down a little bit more because there's sub compartments to this information that we can actually dive into, and you can use these things to your advantage in your sports performance, but honestly even just in day-to-day life. I really kind of learn a lot of these things and then look at even just my work and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, this does actually apply to it. Now, of course, psychology is psychology, just like physiology is physiology, but we're just looking at it from a sports performance way, but it does transfer to real life every day as well. So the first thing is arousal. Now, the word arousal, we're quite familiar with. It's obviously a stimulus of a sort. And for everyone, it's going to be different how we kind of respond and what's our optimal level of arousal, which is the zone of optimal functioning, essentially. And that's where an athlete is going to reach the right level to perform at his or her best, essentially. And how that looks is going to look very different for people because even for some people, and this includes myself, I'm such a calm individual when it comes to my performance. I'm not one that is over in the corner listening to the hardest music that I have in my library to get myself hyped up, which is definitely a form of arousal that is super helpful for some people. But for myself, I'm more of a calm person. But for other people, they might, get really hyped up from, screaming, shouting, jumping around. That's just their level of arousal and where they perform at their best. If they're not bringing that level of arousal into the, sport for, their performance, they're going to have less of a performance than if they do bring it there. Now, for myself personally, being a more calm individual, this is where the inverted U theory comes in. And the inverted U theory essentially is just looking at a bell curve. So a certain level of arousal is going to elicit the best result. So if I'm down here at the bottom of my inverted U or my bell curve and I get up to the top, that's where I'm going to see my best performance from the arousal. However, if too much arousal or stimulus occurs, then I start to come down the backside of my inverted U. And that's going to be problematic because I might think, oh, more is going to be better. But in actuality, I'm putting myself in a worse situation with my arousal because now my performance is going to start to decline. Now, if we go back to the athlete that is able to listen to the intense music, the more intense, the better, the more jumping around and shouting, the better. They have teammates patting them on the back, getting them hyped up, stuff like that. That's called the drive theory. So the drive theory essentially is more arousal, better result, more arousal, better result, so forth, so forth, so forth. Some individuals are that way, and some sports kind of call for that a little bit more. An example of it is like a sprinter, or maybe even like somebody that's about to drop in on a big hit on a snowboard, or mountain biking, motocross, whatever, something. It's about to be very intense very soon. So the drive theory is going to apply to those type of people more so because the more hyped up, the more ready they're going to be, unless they're like myself, where they actually prefer to be more calm, and that actually increases performance. That's where this individualism comes in. But on the other side of that, when you have sports that are going to maybe be a little bit more calm, more collective, more precise, and kind of just chill as a whole. Obviously, I don't work with golfers, but golfing is something that comes to mind with that. A lot of precision, a lot of calculation, a lot of finite body movements to essentially get the best performance out of that. Now, there might be a golfer out there that prefers crazy intense, but typically golf is going to remain fairly chill and calm. So their level of arousal is going to stay lower, and that drive theory likely isn't going to apply to them quite as much. So now we can jump into different types of anxiety essentially. And anxiety can look very different, but we're talking about just sports performance here. So state anxiety is basically a temporary anxiety that is based in emotion because of a certain state of being. So you're at a competition, it's about to get going, you're kind of nervous, not feeling that great. That is going to be more of your state anxiety. It's very situational, and it's also going to depend on many different factors. That also plays into what is called somatic anxiety, where an individual might experience actual physical symptoms of that anxiety. So higher heart rates, sweating, upset stomach, stuff like that. That's going to be our somatic. Now, when we look at trait anxiety is more of a personality characteristics, which can predispose an individual to higher rates of anxiety based upon situations, but not quite the same as state anxiety, which is going to essentially go away once a gate drops or a drop in occurs or a race starts. Whatever the case be, state anxiety typically will dissipate pretty quickly. A trait anxiety is, like I said, more of a personality thing. So that's going to play out a little bit differently and going to also be worked with differently. Now, both of those do play into what's called cognitive anxiety. And cognitive anxiety essentially is going to be like the worrying, the fear of failure, the coming up short, negative thoughts, and stuff like that. But thankfully, we can actually combat that quite a bit and use things like positive self talk to kind of eliminate that and get over that hump so that when we are dealing with, say, it's that state anxiety and we're having the cognitive anxiety to go with it, we're able to have that positive self talk and actually work ourselves back into a place where we're calm, we're collected, we understand what's about to happen. But it's also a good way to kind of reinforce like a mantra or something like that to be like, I can do this. I'm the best at this. I prepared. I feel good. Stuff like that. That's going to essentially just make you feel like just better about the situation rather than when you're having like somatic anxiety and your stomach hurts and your heart's racing and stuff like that. It's a little bit harder to work with. And somatic anxiety gets pretty tough because that's where we see like, or we see, I say, I personally actually deal with having to like use the restroom more, frequent urination, or for some people, even loose stool. And then that plays in the nutritional side of things because we need an athlete to get adequate nutrition for competition. But if that nutrition is being lost because digestion isn't occurring appropriately because of this somatic anxiety, then we can kind of see this connection occur where somebody might not be getting everything they need to be fueled up. Now they're nervous. Now they're using the bathroom more. Now they're dehydrated, so forth, so forth. So combating that can be a little bit harder. And the positive self talk definitely can be a helpful thing, but it's something that kind of goes a little bit further into detail. And that's where it's like, maybe it's a good idea to actually go work with the sports therapist and see what their is on it and what they can do to help that individual. Now, stress comes in different phases as well. So we have distress, which we hear about distress commonly just day to day, negative stress, essentially something that's going to affect you negative, but in this instance, going to affect your performance negatively. Contrary to that, we have eustress. So that's positive stress, and that's going to enhance our performance. So that can be something like moving around, getting a little bit more hyped up, kind of playing into like that drive theory a little bit, but at the same time, going for a little bit of a run before your, marathon starts. Whatever the case be is actually going to be a positive stress, and it typically results in a positive and better performance. Happens in a general adaptation syndrome. So we call that gas. Now there's an alarm phase, which is essentially like the initial stress. So your adrenaline will spike up, our heart rate will increase. That's actually a good response. That means we're going to be ready for whatever the task is. If you're a snowboarder and you're about to drop in and your adrenaline doesn't come up a little bit, your reflexes are going to reduce and you're not going to be kind of ready for what's about to happen. Whether you're sending it off a big jump or just, making your way down the hill, still a lot of focus and reflex that's going to occur. Now, the resistance phase essentially is going to be where the body adapts to that stress. And that's a good thing because that's where we're going to make an adaptation to increase, the endurance or increase our focus, things like that. Now, if we continue on, then we get our exhaustion. And that exhaustion phase essentially is exactly what it sounds like. We've been stressed for too long. Our body is starting to come down on the other side of it. And that's obviously going to lead to a decrease in our performance. Now, motivation and goal setting, this is something that as a coach and trainer for over a decade now, working with athletes, working with clients, sometimes, goal setting is necessary, whether it's a micro goal, something small being a short-term goal, or a long-term goal. Long-term is actually going to be more important to set because we should be developing our short-term based upon the long-term goals. And if we're just forever creating little short-term goals, we might not actually be working towards a bigger achievement. So trying to find something long-term that is going to be, if you're an athlete and you're looking 2 years from now and you want to win a championship, you want to win this competition, you want to finish a marathon in a certain time, you want to lift a certain weight, something like that, long-term goal. That is going to help you create your short-term micro goals to build up to that long-term goal. So for a marathon runner, for example, if they want to be able to run a marathon in a certain time, but they've never even ran a marathon before, first things first, as a micro goal is going to be to run a marathon and finish it. Then we might start to create different goals as far as like a certain pace for 5Ks, certain pace for 10K, certain pace for a half, kind of building up to that pace that that individual wants to meet long-term wise in their marathon. But first, we need to meet these short-term goals to help them achieve and gain a lot of confidence in themselves and what they're doing and how their body is going to respond so that they know that when it is time for competition of that marathon to hit that goal, they're going to feel like they're ready to do it. And that's going to reduce that state of anxiety that we were kind of talking about a little bit more. So preparation is super helpful. But that's where this goal setting really actually helps a lot, because if you're feeling unprepared and not ready, there is a good chance that maybe you didn't reach your short-term goals before you're trying to achieve that long-term one. And that could, be a big reason for those different anxieties coming forward. Now, as a coach, I'm always trying to help, give motivation to athletes and clients, but that's only going to be one form of motivation, and that's extrinsic. So I'm giving outside motivation, and it's not only myself. Sometimes the outside motivation could be an award or, winning a race or something like that. But a more important motivation is that intrinsic motivation. So that intrinsic motivation is basically something that an individual gives to themselves as, like, I can do this. And that's where like positive self-talk can come into play to help them actually achieve what they're wanting to achieve. Nobody's influencing that but for the individual, which does make it much more challenging, but it is so much more powerful than the extrinsic. When somebody comes to work with me because they're motivated and ready before they even speak with me, it makes getting to those short-term goals and the long-term goals so much easier, because I'm not having to basically help them build their confidence in what they should be able to do. Now, of course, if somebody doesn't have that, we do our best to develop it over time. But those that come with that on day one definitely are a step further. Now, if you're one of the individuals that deals with that state anxiety and you are having a hard time calming down, you're almost starting to feel more somatic anxiety where maybe your muscles are tensing up and you're not quite feeling, yourself and ready for whatever it is that you have coming forward. Like I said, this kind of applies to everyday life and work as well. This isn't just like sports, but when you have that response, there are things that you can do to try and help. Now, diaphragm breathing is going to be one of those things that can be really, really helpful to calm an individual down. And how that really works is when we're breathing through our diaphragm and expanding, it's going to actually switch our nervous system away from the sympathetic, which is our fight or flight, to parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, which is going to essentially lower heart rate, lower respiration, and stuff like that. So you can kind of get more calm and collected. That's one method. Another method is to actually do progressive muscle relaxation. And that method is uh, basically tensing muscle up, releasing, tensing the next muscle up, releasing, tensing another muscle up, releasing. And for those that are listening, I tense my forearm, then my bicep, then my pec. And I'm kind of like body scanning in a way. And body scans are a big part of meditation as well. You sit down, start to meditate and breathe, and you go, okay, I'm going to check in with my feet. I'm going to check in with my calves. I'm going to check in with my quads and my hamstrings, my glutes, my hips, all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like a mental checklist. So, how I personally see that progressive muscle relaxation is like, obviously, muscle tensing and releasing is a huge way to release tension, but also it's a really good way to body scan and kind of see what's going on through the system. And especially if you're one of those individuals, like you're sitting around waiting for whatever the activity is that is giving you that anxiety, you might start to feel like a sense of like heaviness in your legs and stuff like that, which is not uncommon. And that somatic anxiety essentially is going to make your body feel more heavy. So by doing the progressive muscle relaxation can be really helpful in that. Now, long term wise, and not so much in the like case of like feeling that anxiety, you can obviously practice mindfulness, practice meditation and stuff like that to calm down. And that's a good practice that kind of builds up over time. Doing it singularly isn't as effective. We want to fill our cup up over time and give ourselves those tools within meditation so that when, an anxiety peaks up for an activity, a sport, or whatever, we're able to kind of fall back to our practice and know, like, hey, if I do this, whether it's a body scan, whether it's diaphragmatic breathing, whatever it is, I'm going to be able to calm myself down because I practice it just like I practice my sport. Speaking of diaphragmatic breathing, there's also things that we can do up top that are going to help us breathe better, like breathing through our nose. And that's why our sponsor, Intake Breathing, is such a good tool. Intake breathing is a nasal dilator that is going to enhance your ability to breathe through your nose, which is going to be great for filtration, humidification, and also bringing temperature to the air before it hits your lungs and goes into your blood. So it's a great tool. I've used it for many, many years now. I couldn't recommend it anymore. You can also use this by heading over to intakebreathing.com/outlierathlete and use code outlierathlete for 15% off. Now, like anything with performance, if proper rest and recovery is not happening, our mental state is going to get as broken down and fatigued as our physical state of our muscles and joints and stuff like that. So, adequate sleep, adequate time away and calming down is going to be one of the biggest things you can do for your overall performance. And it's funny because most of the time when I tell people to, hey, you need to recover, you need to relax, they're thinking more so to their muscles and not as much to their brain. So maybe they'll go lay down, but they're still scrolling on their phone, they're on their computer, stuff like that, that still really can stimulate the brain and not actually give it time to relax, which is why things like, meditation, breath work, and stuff like that is really nice because usually you're going to be away from your devices and actually, working at the task at hand for, 15, 20 minutes. And those are really good relaxation techniques for the brain and actually help with these things of stress, the anxieties, and calm those down so that when you do go do your sport, or you do go do your activity, you're feeling better and actually rejuvenated. Now, like I said, everyone is so individualized when it comes to this sort of stuff. It's psychology, it's very unique. Physiology is unique as well, but there's some principles that are more set in stone. So when we look at this from a psychological place, it's really important to recognize some people are going to react a certain way and other people are going to react a certain way. So it's kind of fun to look at, but at the same time, like as a coach or an individual looking at yourself, it's really important to kind of identify, for one, what is happening to you, and then identify what works best to basically cope with those issues as well. So a lot of information that I think is really helpful. Now, I know you might be listening to this and being like, oh, well, this is like more performance based. I want more day to day. All this stuff applies to your day to day as well, because we're basically trying to be the best humans that we can be. So I personally tried a few different things throughout my athletic career that, I've been the person that listened to the crazy music and got myself all hyped, and then found out that I don't perform better. And then when I listen to calmer music, or I'm doing something that's a little more chill, I actually get better results on it. So yeah, just play with it a little bit. You'll figure out what essentially works best for you. And yeah, it's actually kind of fun to figure out what makes you feel the best. So thanks so much for listening or watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one.